I wasn't expecting anyone that night. Honestly, I was halfway through an entire pizza by myself, binge-watching some dumb crime show, and probably dozing off on the couch. The last thing I needed was some random knock on my door at 2 a.m. But then again, life doesn't really follow the script you want, does it? So there I was, pizza crust in one hand, remote in the other, when this loud pounding startled me enough to almost drop both. I grumbled, shoved the blanket off my legs, and shuffled to the door. Peeking through the peephole, I saw him. Ryan. My sort of acquaintance from work, the guy from accounting who always had a crooked grin and a tendency to show up everywhere I least expected. He looked wobbly, like he'd had way too much to drink, his hair a mess and shirt untucked. His cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were glazed but still holding on to something like desperation. I blinked, confused for half a second. What the hell was Ryan doing at my doorstep this late? I unlocked the door, and before I could ask anything, he stepped inside, mumbling, "Hey, I know it's late, but can I crash here? Just for a bit?" Now, I'm not the kind of guy who invites strangers inside, especially not drunken ones, and especially not the kind of guy the first barely talked to outside of awkward office small talk. But there was something in the way he stood there, like this wasn't a casual favor. Like maybe he was hoping for more. I hesitated, locked the door behind him, and motioned for him to sit on the couch. "You okay, man?" "What happened?" He slumped down, rubbing his eyes like he'd been holding back tears. "Just bad night. Thought maybe I could crash here instead of going home to my empty apartment. It's easier here." I wasn't sure if he meant easier because of people around, or because he wasn't alone. Either way, I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, grabbed a glass of water and handed it to him. He took it with a shaky hand, sighed, and sipped. "Thanks, man. You don't know how much this means." I looked at him, the guy I'd only seen at office parties or quick coffee runs. Now here he was, vulnerable and half-drunk in my living room, and suddenly the lines between work buddy and something else felt a lot blurrier. What started as a weird, inconvenient night was about to become a whole lot more complicated. And honestly, I had no idea what to do next. I sat back down on the armchair opposite him, watching Ryan as he ran a hand through that messy hair like he was trying to organize his thoughts, or maybe just trying to calm himself. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the TV, still flickering on the crime show I had been half watching. For a few seconds, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of us. So I said, trying to fill the silence without sounding like I was prying, "What happened? Bad night at the bar or something else?" He chuckled, but it was a sad kind of laugh. "Bar's part of it, yeah. But it's more than that. I guess sometimes the noise in my head gets too loud, and drowning it out with cheap whiskey seems easier." He glanced at me, eyes suddenly clearer and serious. "Don't tell anyone I said that." I smiled, shaking my head. "Your secret's safe. But hey, you don't have to explain if you don't want to." Ryan looked like he was about to say something else, but then stopped himself, just taking another slow sip from the glass. I realized I was holding my breath, waiting for whatever it was he wasn't ready to say. The silence stretched, and I found myself wondering things I hadn't expected to. Did I ever really notice him before? Not just the guy who tallied up numbers at the next desk, but him. The one with a shy smile and these eyes that seemed to hold more stories than he'd ever share in a casual conversation. "Want to sit closer?" I asked, surprising myself. He looked at me, a little puzzled, but he moved over to the couch's edge, making room. I shifted too, and suddenly the space between us felt less like a gap and more like a shared corner of the night. "I'm sorry if this is weird," Ryan said quietly. "I didn't mean to just show up. I guess I just didn't want to be alone." I nodded slowly. "I get that. Sometimes the worst thing is the silence when you get home." He looked down at his hands, then back up, and I noticed the faint tremble in his fingers. "Yeah, exactly. It's like the apartment's too big, and the walls just echo all the stuff I'm trying to ignore." I wanted to say something comforting, but honestly, I didn't know what. So instead, I reached out and lightly brushed his arm. It was an instinct more than a calculated move, but the way he leaned just a little into the touch told me it was okay. "Hey," I said softly, You're not alone here." He gave me a small, grateful smile, and for a moment, it felt like the tension in the room eased just a bit. Then Ryan's phone buzzed, breaking the bubble. He glanced at it, frowned, and quickly silenced it. "That's my ex," he muttered. "She's been blowing up my phone all night. Guess this. Bad night. Has more layers." I raised my eyebrows. "Wow. Sounds rough." He nodded, running a hand through his hair again. "Yeah, we broke up a month ago, but it's messy. She's not handling it well." His voice cracked a little, and I caught myself holding back an urge to pull him closer. Then he shrugged, almost embarrassed. "I guess I just needed to get away from all that. Figure out what's next." I shifted so I was facing him more directly. "Hey, you don't have to figure it all out tonight. Just for now, maybe just be here." Ryan looked at me, and in that gaze, I saw something soft and hopeful flicker beneath all the exhaustion and pain. It hit me then. He wasn't just some guy needing a place to crash. He was someone needing to be seen. I grabbed the blanket from the couch and tossed it over his legs. He looked surprised, but didn't protest. "Thanks," he said quietly. "You're welcome," I replied. "Seriously, you can stay as long as you need." Ryan's smile grew a little. "You're not like anyone I know." "Maybe that's a good thing," I said, grinning. He laughed softly, a real laugh this time, and the room felt warmer than it had before. After a while, the conversation drifted away from heavy stuff. We talked about music we liked, dumb office stories, even debated the best pizza toppings. It felt natural and easy, like we were old friends catching up rather than coworkers who barely said more than hi before. At some point, Ryan's eyes started to droop, and he shifted, curling into the blanket like he was finally letting some of the day's weight go. I watched him, feeling this weird mix of protectiveness and something else I wasn't ready to name yet. "Hey," I whispered, "you good to crash here? For real, no pressure." He mumbled a sleepy, "Yeah," and then, almost as an afterthought, added, "Thanks for letting me crash." "For everything." I nodded, feeling like I didn't really know how to respond, except with a quiet anytime. As he settled in, I realized this night was already way beyond anything I expected. From a surprise knock on the door to sitting here with Ryan, asleep on my couch, it was like life decided to throw me a curveball. And, honestly, I wasn't mad about it. I just wondered where this unexpected detour might take us next. I ended up sitting on the floor next to the couch, half watching the TV, but mostly just staring at Ryan as he slept. There was something about seeing someone so vulnerable, so out of their usual armor, that made me feel both protective and oddly drawn in. I didn't even notice the time slipping by until my phone buzzed. Work emails, no doubt, but I ignored them. What felt important right now wasn't numbers or deadlines, but this unexpected connection unfolding in my living room. When Ryan finally stirred, it was just before dawn. His eyes fluttered open, and for a split second he looked completely disoriented, like he wasn't sure where he was or how he'd gotten there. Then he caught sight of me and managed a slow, tentative smile. "Morning," he said, voice a little raspy. "Hey," I replied softly. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I expected," he admitted, stretching like he was trying to shake off the fog in his brain. "Thanks for letting me crash. Honestly, I wasn't sure you'd say yes." I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but truth was, I hadn't wanted to say no. "Sometimes you just have to take a chance, right?" He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck like he wasn't sure what to say next. For a moment, we just sat there, the morning light filtering through the window and painting everything in this soft golden glow that made the whole apartment feel a little less lonely. "So," I said, breaking the silence, "what happens now?" Ryan laughed, a little bitter but with a hint of hope. "No clue. I guess I have to face the mess I ran away from." I wanted to offer some profound advice, but honestly, I wasn't sure I had any. Instead, I just said, "Well, if you ever need a place to run to again, you know where to find me." He gave me a look, half surprised, half grateful, and then stood up, stretching again. "I might just take you up on that." We ended up grabbing some coffee from the place downstairs. It felt natural talking to him while the city woke up around us. No awkwardness, no pretending to be anything other than two people trying to navigate their complicated lives. Ryan told me more about the breakup, how it had blindsided him, and how he'd been struggling with feeling lost. Listening to him, I realized how little I actually knew about the guy I'd sat next to during meetings and shared an elevator ride with. There was this whole world inside him that no one got to see, and now I was starting to. As we walked back to my place, he stopped suddenly and looked at me with this intensity that caught me off guard. "You know," he said, "I'm glad I knocked on your door that night. Really glad." I felt my heart skip a beat, but I just smiled. Me too. Over the next few days, Ryan kept showing up. Sometimes for a coffee, sometimes just to hang out and escape whatever was waiting for him back at his apartment. We fell into this easy rhythm. No pressure, no expectations, just two people finding comfort in each other's company. One evening, we ended up cooking dinner together. I'm not much of a chef, but Ryan had this way of making it fun, cracking jokes as he chopped vegetables and snuck tastes of the sauce. It was the first time I'd seen him truly relaxed, laughing like the weight on his shoulders had lifted, if only for a little while. As we ate, the conversation turned quieter, more personal. Ryan looked at me and said, "I don't think I've ever felt this understood." I felt the same way. "Maybe that's because you've never really let anyone in." He nodded, eyes shining with something like hope and fear tangled together. "Yeah, maybe." Later that night, as we sat side by side on the couch, our hands brushed. Neither of us pulled away. Instead, I found myself reaching out, fingers weaving through his. "Can I be honest?" Ryan asked. "Always." He took a deep breath. "I'm scared. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of what this could mean." I squeezed his hand gently. "Me too, but sometimes the best things come from the scariest moments." He smiled then, a slow, genuine smile that made my chest tighten. Maybe we're both ready to take that chance. And in that quiet moment, with the city humming softly outside, I realized that the night Ryan came to my door drunk wasn't just a weird interruption. It was the start of something neither of us saw coming, but both desperately needed. After that night on the couch, things shifted between us, but not in any sudden, dramatic way. It was quieter, more tentative, like we were both testing the waters without rushing in. I think we both knew that after what Ryan had been through, pushing too hard too fast would only backfire. So we just kept showing up in each other's lives, little by little. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself texting him out of the blue, something about grabbing brunch. I wasn't expecting much, but to my surprise, he said yes. When he showed up at my door, wearing that familiar crooked smile and jeans that looked way too comfortable, my heart did this weird flip I wasn't ready to admit to myself. We went to this tiny cafe a few blocks from my place. The kind of place with mismatched chairs, homemade pastries, and a chalkboard menu that changed daily. Ryan ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and I got whatever the barista recommended, which turned out to be some fancy latte with caramel drizzle. We sat outside, the spring sun warming our faces, and for a few hours, we just talked. Not about work, not about breakups, just everything and nothing all at once. At one point, Ryan caught me staring at him while he was mid-sentence, and he laughed. "What?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Nothing," I said, trying to play it cool. But I was definitely caught off guard by how easy it felt to look at him like that. "No, you're definitely staring." "Spill it." I shrugged, then decided honesty was better. "I don't know. You just look different, I guess." "Happier?" He smiled, a little shy this time. "I am." I think hearing that made something inside me relax. It was like we were both moving forward, even if the path was messy and uncertain. After brunch, we wandered through a nearby park, watching kids chase pigeons and dogs dart after balls. Ryan pointed out this old oak tree that apparently had been there since the town was founded. He got all sentimental about history and roots, which was adorable. I realized then how little I knew about him outside of work and those late-night talks. The more I saw, the more I wanted to know. A few weeks later, we were at my place again, this time watching a movie neither of us was really paying attention to. Ryan was curled up next to me on the couch, his head resting on my shoulder, and I'm pretty sure I'd never felt so calm in my life. At some point, he shifted and looked up at me, eyes soft and uncertain. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you think I'm crazy for showing up that night? Drunk, vulnerable, making a mess of things?" I laughed, shaking my head. "No way. I think it was brave. And maybe a little desperate, but who isn't sometimes?" He smiled and tucked a stray lock of hair behind his ear. "I guess I was just scared. Scared of being alone and scared of what might happen if I let someone in." I reached out, brushing my fingers against his cheek. "It's okay to be scared, but you're not alone anymore." His breath hitched, and for a moment, everything else faded. The movie, the outside world, the past that had haunted him. It was just us, sitting close, with a feeling neither of us had named yet, but both could feel. That night, we finally kissed. It wasn't some grand cinematic moment, but quiet and real. Like the kind of kiss that promises maybe, just maybe, things could be okay. Afterwards, we stayed close, talking about everything and nothing, until the sun started creeping through the blinds. Ryan looked at me and said, "Thanks for being the one door I could knock on." I smiled, thinking how strange life was. How a random, drunken visit turned into something I never saw coming but didn't want to let go of. And honestly, neither of us knew what the future held, but right then, that was enough. After that night, things between Ryan and me settled into this new, unspoken understanding. It wasn't flashy or overwhelming. It was subtle, like the steady pulse of a song you didn't realize you'd been humming all along. We were figuring it out as we went, the way two people do when they're both a little scared but willing to try. One evening, about a week after that first kiss, Ryan showed up at my door with this nervous energy I hadn't seen before. He was holding 2 takeout containers from our favorite Thai place, and his smile was wide, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Dinner?" he asked, voice hopeful. I grinned. "Absolutely." We ate on my tiny balcony, the city's lights flickering in the distance, and a cool breeze making the scent of jasmine from a neighbor's plant drift over. Ryan was quieter than usual, poking at his noodles like he was wrestling with something. After a while, I said, "You've got something on your mind." He sighed, setting his chopsticks down. "Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about us, about what this means." I nodded, waiting for him to go on. "I don't want to mess this up," he admitted. "I'm not great at relationships. Hell, I'm not even sure I know how to do this. How to be with someone without all the fear and the walls." I reached across the table, taking his hand in mine. "Hey, no one expects you to have it all figured out. We're both learning." He squeezed my hand, relief washing over his face. "Thanks for being patient with me. You don't have to thank me. I want this. Us." Ryan looked at me then, and in his eyes, I saw something raw and real. Me too. That night, we talked for hours about our pasts, our fears, the kind of people we wanted to be. For the first time, I felt like I was peeling back layers of Ryan I hadn't even known existed, and each one made me want him more. A few days later, we found ourselves wandering through a small art gallery downtown. Ryan surprised me by pointing out a painting he loved. A messy splash of colors that somehow made sense despite the chaos. "It's like life," he said softly. "Messy and unpredictable, but still beautiful." I smiled, liking how his mind worked. "You're pretty insightful for an accountant." He laughed, elbowing me gently. "Hey, don't underestimate the power of spreadsheets and late nights." As we stood there, surrounded by art and quiet conversations, Ryan slipped his hand into mine. It felt like an unspoken promise, not just of us, but of trust. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when his past would sneak back in, the silent phone calls he wouldn't answer, the nights he'd stare out the window, lost in thought. I tried to be patient, reminding myself that healing isn't linear. One night, after a particularly rough day at work for him, he came over, exhausted and frustrated. We sat on the couch in silence for a while before he finally spoke. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just doomed to mess things up," he said quietly. I shook my head, pulling him close. You're not. Not with me. He looked up, eyes shining with unshed tears. How do you do that? Believe in me when I can't? I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. Because I see you. Not the broken parts, not just the scars, but the person in between. And I like who I see. Ryan leaned into me, resting his head on my chest, and I felt that steady beat again. Our heartbeat in sync, messy but real. Over the next few weeks, we kept building on that fragile trust. We learned each other's quirks, the way Ryan always needed the window cracked open when he slept, or how I made a terrible coffee but kept trying anyway. One Sunday morning, we found ourselves in the park, lying on a blanket under a big oak tree, the same kind he'd told me about months earlier. The sun was warm, the air smelled like fresh grass, and everything felt quiet and perfect. Ryan turned to me, eyes filled with a mixture of nervousness and hope. Can I ask you something? Anything. He took a deep breath. Do you think this could be something real? Not just a fling or a distraction? I looked at him, heart pounding. I don't just think it, Ryan. I know it. He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that always made my stomach twist. And in that moment, with the world stretched out around us, I realized that the night he came to my door drunk wasn't just some random event. It was the beginning of a story neither of us expected, but both of us desperately needed. A story about taking chances, about healing, and maybe, just maybe, about love. We spent that afternoon under the oak tree like time was on pause, just the two of us and the gentle rustle of leaves above. Ryan's fingers intertwined with mine, and for once, neither of us felt like we were holding back. It was this quiet kind of intimacy where words weren't always necessary, but when they came, they carried weight. As the sun started dipping lower, casting long shadows across the grass, Ryan shifted so he was sitting up, brushing some dirt off his jeans. He looked over at me with that nervous energy I'd come to recognize as his "I'm about to say something important" face. What's up? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He swallowed, took a breath, and then said, I've been thinking about us, about where this is going. I nodded, heart thudding in my chest. Me too. He bit his lip, then blurted out. I know I'm not exactly the easiest guy to be with. There's a lot of baggage, and sometimes I get scared and push people away. He looked down, then back up, eyes honest and a little vulnerable. But I want to try. I want to see where this could go with you. The raw honesty hit me like a punch to the gut, because I was feeling the same way, but didn't want to be the first to say it. So I reached out and squeezed his hand. Ryan, I'm not perfect either. I've got my own stuff, my own fears, but I want to be with you. I want to see where this leads. He smiled then, the kind of smile that made all the uncertainties feel like they might actually be okay. He leaned in and kissed me, a soft, slow kiss that said more than words ever could. After that day, things started to feel more real. Not in a suddenly serious, defining the relationship kind of way, but in the way that two lives start to blend, the little routines, the inside jokes, the way we checked in on each other without being asked. One night, a couple of weeks later, Ryan invited me over to his place. It was the first time I'd been there since that night he came to my door, and walking in, I was struck by how different it felt. Warmer somehow, less empty. He had candles lit, music playing softly, and even though his apartment was still a bit cluttered and chaotic, it felt lived in, like it belonged to him. We sat on his couch, sipping cheap wine and talking about everything and nothing. At one point, he reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. You know, he said, voice low, I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who has someone waiting for him at home. I smiled, feeling my chest tighten. Well, you do now. He laughed softly, but there was this flicker of something deeper in his eyes. I'm scared, you know, of messing this up, of losing you before we really even have a chance. I took his hand, leaning in closer. We're not perfect. We're both scared, but that doesn't mean it won't work. It just means we have to be honest with each other. He nodded, resting his forehead against mine. "I want to be honest. I want to trust you. And I want to be there for you," I said. That night, when he fell asleep in my arms, I realized how far we'd come from that first drunken knock on my door. What started as a messy, unexpected moment had turned into something I didn't want to let go of. But love, as I was learning, wasn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It was about showing up, even when it was scary, even when it was messy, and choosing each other again and again. And that was exactly what we were doing. We kept falling into this rhythm, small moments that, in hindsight, turned out to be the foundation of something real. Like the morning Ryan made pancakes for the first time, his attempt resulting in a half-burnt mess, but he wore this triumphant grin like he'd just won a trophy. I didn't have the heart to tell him they tasted like cardboard. Not exactly Gordon Ramsay material, huh? I teased as we sat eating in the tiny kitchen, the smoke alarm quietly protesting from the background. Ryan laughed, brushing flour off his hands. "Hey, I'm learning! Plus, I figured if you're going to be the main guy in my life, I better at least master breakfast." That cracked me up more than it probably should have. Breakfast felt like this silly, mundane thing, but with Ryan, it was special, like every little task we shared was a thread tying us closer. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when his anxiety flared up, and he'd retreat into himself, shutting down in ways that frustrated me because I wanted to help but didn't always know how. One night, he canceled plans last minute, and I found myself sitting on my couch, the silence reminding me too much of the loneliness he'd once escaped from. I called him, voice soft. "Hey, you okay?" He didn't answer, but that wasn't unusual. A few hours later, he texted, "Sorry, just needed some space." I understood, even if it stung. The next day, he came by my place, looking tired but determined. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice tentative. "Always," I said, sitting down beside him. He took a deep breath. I hate how sometimes I shut down like that. I don't mean to push you away, but it's like my brain just gets caught in this loop I can't break. I reached out, running my thumb over his knuckles. "I get it, and it's okay. But can you promise me one thing?" "What? To tell me when you're feeling like that instead of retreating? I want to be there for you, not guessing from a distance." He smiled, a little shaky but genuine. "I'll try. No more disappearing acts." That kind of honesty was new for us, and it felt like a breakthrough. One lazy Sunday, we ended up binge-watching an old sitcom, laughing at the ridiculous situations and cheesy jokes. Ryan leaned into me, his head on my shoulder, and I realized I hadn't felt this comfortable with anyone in a long time. "Do you ever think about the future?" I asked quietly. He blinked, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm scared of it, but I do, especially now." I smiled, feeling this warmth spread inside me. "Me too." He looked up at me, eyes full of something tender. "What if we don't mess it up?" I grinned. "Then we keep going. Together." As weeks turned into months, our relationship grew with these steady, imperfect steps. We celebrated small victories, like Ryan finally confronting his ex to set boundaries, or me opening up about my own fears of rejection. We learned to be patient, to listen, and to lean on each other when the past threatened to pull us back. One evening, after a long day at work, Ryan surprised me by showing up with a bouquet of wildflowers. He handed them over sheepishly. "For you," he said, "because you've been there for me, even when I wasn't sure I deserved it." I pulled him into a hug, my heart full. "You deserve all of it." Later, as we sat on my balcony, city lights twinkling around us, Ryan rested his head on my chest. I wrapped my arm around him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against mine. "I'm glad you knocked on my door that night," I whispered. He smiled, eyes closing. "Me too. It was the best mistake I ever made. And honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself." Months had passed since that first night Ryan showed up at my door, drunk and vulnerable, asking to stay. What started as a messy, unexpected moment had grown into something steady and real, built on patience, honesty, and a lot of late-night talks. One Saturday morning, I found myself standing in the kitchen, making coffee, as Ryan slept on the couch nearby. The soft rise and fall of his breathing, the way his hair fell across his forehead. It was a quiet kind of peace I hadn't known I was missing until it was here. When he finally stirred, he stretched and smiled at me as if the world had just gotten a little brighter. I handed him a mug and sat down beside him, our fingers brushing naturally. "Hey," he said, voice still thick with sleep. "You ever think about how wild this whole thing is? How a drunken knock on a door turned into us?" I laughed softly. "Yeah, I never would have guessed." He looked thoughtful for a moment. "I'm glad you didn't turn me away." "Me too," I admitted. We sat there, sipping coffee, wrapped in a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. No grand declarations, no fireworks. Just two people who'd found something worth holding on to. Later that afternoon, we went for a walk through the park near my place, the familiar oak tree standing tall and steady, just like our journey. Ryan stopped, turning to me with a shy smile. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, "but I know I want to figure it out with you." I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. Same here. It wasn't about perfect timing or having all the answers. It was about choosing each other, day after day, with all the messiness and fear that came along. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized this was more than I'd hoped for, and exactly what I needed. Sometimes, the best kind of love starts with a knock on the door and a little bit of courage to let someone in.